AJAX, we get another acronym. Congrats. Before AJAX, it wasn't seamless because in between these scenes, we'd have to refresh the entire page. So instead of one long shot scene of all these nice transitions, what you'd really see is a cut, re-roll, cut, re-roll, cut, re-roll. Every time a scene needed to change. And that's not good. I mean, this is as much as you get a new email in your inbox, you'd have to see it, click refresh. And what would happen is they wouldn't just send you that new data. Google would have to recompile their entire site on the back end along with your new email and send it to the front end. And that was just a little too much. It took a lot of time and it was unnecessary. So I think it has the year in here. By 2003, this was resolved with something called AJAX. AJAX stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. What does asynchronous mean? What does synchronous mean? Synchronize, happening one after another. And this is how JavaScript works, right? It's synchronous. Two lines don't get read at the same time. It reads your if statement, then it reads the thing inside of it and moves forward. But in order for our program to run and updates to be coming in, we have to have the ability for more than one thing to happen at once. So AJAX introduced the ability to send out a request to a server, let your website keep running, and then once the server comes back, throw in the new data. So really we have two things happening at once. Our website's running while the request is out talking to a database server and eventually coming back. And this is what made that powerful. This has evolved into multiple JavaScript packages now. We'll get to know one called Axios very soon. But today, we're going to use what JavaScript has for us. How do we create a server request using pure JavaScript and AJAX built into the language? So asynchronous code, or async, I'm not spelling this right, am I? Sync. Right. Asynchronous code or asynchronous JavaScript, JavaScript had to be introduced. And the way they introduced this is they created a new constructor function for JavaScript called the XML HTTP request constructor function. Ugh. So it's the XML HTTP request. And it's a function. So we can say, hey, give me a new XML HTTP request object. And this gives you an object that has the ability to make asynchronous JavaScript requests. So we're going to use this to make a request to our to-do API and any other API we'd like to request using JavaScript. Any high-level questions on AJAX before we see it in action? Cool. So quick memory callback. What is the constructor function called we have to use? Oh man, in it. The XML, fortunately, it will autofill the rest. Yes, XML HTTP request. It is a constructor function. So we have to say, give me a new one. And also save it in a variable, which we hyphenate as XHR, stands for XML HTTP request. It's an object. It's an object. So this object has all sorts of things inside of it. There's a couple that we absolutely need, though, to make this work. So let's grab the vSchool. I'm going to grab the URL that I used in Postman, because I know there's two to-dos in here. And this is the place I'd like to request and get JSON back. So I'm just going to comment it out here so we have it. So first, I need to open up a request. I need to tell my XHR object to go make a request. And the way to do that is the object has a .open method. And this is what creates a request. It needs to know what kind of request, though, and where to send it. So what kind of HTTP request allows us to ask for information from a site? Get, yes. So we put in all caps, get. I want you to go get something. Second argument, where is this data that I should go get? What does that mean? The URL. So I want you to go get from this URL. And that is enough to send the request out. Well, no, it's enough to make the request. We then have to tell it to send. So this creates the request by setting up the request type and location, or the URL of where to go find that resource. And this sends the request to the URL. Great. How do we know when it comes back? This introduces a few pieces here that we'll cover. So now that I've got this in the right place, I'll take it out. Our XHR object has something called a ready state, camel case, a ready state. And this can be one of 4 stages. It starts at 0, then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So no, it doesn't start at 1. It starts at 1. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm pretty sure. I know it ends at 4, so we'll console log it. We'll figure it out. What does 1 mean? 1 means the request went out. When ready state changes to 2, that means the server's processing. 3, the server's about to send a response. 4, your response has landed. You can now use your data. And the nice thing is our XHR object will update automatically. In fact, if I can't do it just yet. I'm going to console log the ready state really shortly, and we'll see the number change. It'll happen really quickly to show you how quick this process happens. But this is how we know our data is ready. The asynchronous request has come back, and now we can throw it into our synchronous code and make it work with our website. Well, the XHR object kind of needs to listen for this. What do you think of when you hear the word listen? Where have we set up listeners before? Yeah, so think of this like an event. Every time a stage occurs in the ready state, it's like a new event occurs. And the XHR object has a method that for some reason is not camel cased, and it still bothers me, but it's called on ready state change. One big word. And it is equal to a function that we get to declare what it does. What's fortunate for us is that the XHR object will call that function every single time the ready state changes. We don't have to worry about the state changing. We just have to tell it what to do every time it changes. 4 is the one we're looking for, right? We want to know when our data is back. We don't care if it's still in the server. We just want our website to keep running. But once it hits 4, we got to do something with it. So we need to ask a condition, because how many times will this function run? If it gets fired every single time the ready state changes, how many times will it fire? 4 times, because there's 4 states. Well, we only want to have something happen once it hits the 4th stage. So we got to put an if statement in here. We're going to ask if the xhr.readystate, which is camel case for some fun reason, is equal to 4, your data is back. And now we can do something with it at line 6. Let's see this here. I'm going to console.log xhr.readystate, link this to an HTML file so we can see it in our console browser console. Console browser. Words are hard. Okay. Come on now. Here's our wonderful website. Open up the wrong button. Open up the console. 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's refresh the page and see this happen again so this runs again. Notice 1 hit, there's a split-second delay, then 2, 3, 4. So 1, it goes out, 4, it's back. So that shows you this function just fired 4 times every time the state changed. Well, do things always go well when you request from a server? How many of you have received the page 404 not found? I'm sure all of us have at some time. But that's an example of something going wrong. Well, this isn't accounting for something going wrong. This is just saying the server's coming back with a response. But that response might be one of 2 things. The response, server response may be either your data or an error. Something happened. So how do we know if it was a good response or a bad response? That is a server status code, which 404 is an example of. The code 404 means the thing you requested doesn't exist. We couldn't find it. So the status code for things went well, status of 200. So when this comes back at 4, we also want to see if the XHR's status was 200. Did it come back, and did it come back in good order? So this is what our full statement will end up. At this point, we can now interact with our response. I'm going to, though, just so we can see it, we didn't do this yet. Let's console log the XHR object. Actually, yeah, this will be good. So here is the XHR objects, and why am I getting 4 of them? It's firing 4 times, and we're just seeing what our XHR object looks like over time. So the first time it goes out, it's got a ready state of, that doesn't make any sense, that's wrong, for status 200. So this is actually our response. This is the final one. There we go. Ready state 1, oh, because it's giving us the final. Okay, so the first one was ready state 1. A console log with ready state 2. The 4th one comes back and it has a response text. Well, what does this response text look like? It looks like an array of objects, but what data type is it? JSON, which we know as strings. So JSON in JSON format is really just one giant string. And we can't use this as an object until we turn it into an object. But we do know that the XHR has a .response text that has all the data we requested. So I'm going to just, instead of console log the XHR object, when it hits the final stage, I'm going to console log the XHR.response text. See what that looks like. There it is. There's my array of to-dos. Again, still as one giant string. So we need a way of converting this from JSON to JavaScript. And there are 2 pre-built methods in JavaScript that allows you to convert JavaScript to JSON and vice versa. So convert JSON to JavaScript. That method is json.parse. Alternatively, convert JavaScript to JSON is json.stringify. Turn it into a string, stringify it. It's a very creative word. So what do I need to do to my XHR.response text? I need to JSON parse it into JavaScript. So I'm going to replace my console log with a json.parse, and I'm going to console log that, just to see if this JSON mess turns into JavaScript. And now what do I have? An array of to-do objects that I can now use in JavaScript. So I'm going to save that in a variable. Const to-dos equals my parsed response. And now you've successfully got something from the internet. How do we use it? So I went at a good pace through this process. So let's talk about it for a second. What allows us to wait until the server comes back to then grab the data and parse it? The ready state. Yeah, and when the ready state hits what number is our data ready? 4. And a status of 200 is good. Well, yeah, exactly. Then the XHR object will be holding our response text when it comes back so we can parse it and save it in a variable that we can now use in our program. Wonderful. What if something goes wrong? What if my URL doesn't exist? I'm going to make a request to /taught instead of to do. What kind of status code did I get? Yeah, it says, hey, you made a GET request to this URL. It doesn't exist. Like, prove it. Yeah, okay, I don't know what that means. I guess you're proving it. So if I wanted to handle errors, how could I handle it in case the XHR status came back to 404? Else if. Try catch is a good thought to have right now. We're leading to that for next week. But what would I ask to see if it was a bad request? Let's say not found. 404. And we should probably wait till it comes back just to make sure. Otherwise, every time this fires, it's going to check the status. And in case we get the status early, we'll fire too early, so we're going to wait till it's done. And if that happens, we're going to say, let's be rude, let's throw a new error saying it broke. See how that handles it. Hey, look, uncaught error. I broke. I handled my error, kind of. So it's just an idea to show like XHR status will be whatever the status came back as. And we will be using a framework to handle our errors like this in a much more elegant way using catch. But if you are not going to use any JavaScript libraries, you're starting from scratch, this is how you request from the server. One last thing, how do I now use my to-dos in my application? Do my to-dos exist in global scope? No. What scope are they combined to? Yeah, it lives right there. So how do I get that out of there? I don't want to declare it globally. I'll say that out front. I do not want to declare to-dos outside of these functions. I want to declare it here. Can't return it either because this function is set equal to a pre-built method. So how do I get this data out of here into somewhere else? What if I wrote a function that expected an array as an argument? How could I send the to-dos into this function? Yeah, we use what functions do best. After we have our to-dos, we'll say, great, call my function, send those guys into there. Now I don't care about their scoping. Once I have them, I'm calling my function, and now they exist down here as array. So now I'm going to console log array. I'm not console logging anything here. So we're not going to see anything until it hits this line. And sure enough, line 22, here's our array of to-dos. What are we thinking? So much new stuff. I don't know what to think.
I think the last part.
This part here? Yeah. Comment that out for a minute. Refocus. So Postman is really cool because I can say, hey, go to this URL and show me what the data looks like that URL is hosting. But I want to use this data in my application. And it doesn't exist on my computer. It exists in an external database. So how do I get this array of objects into my program? Well, I have to use the XHR object that knows how to reach out to a remote server using the open method. It says, hey, open a GET request and send it here. And then we say XHR to actually execute it. While it's out, it's firing this state change every time the process gets a little further and further into completion. where 4 is when it's done, and 200 status is if it went well. So provided these are the cases, once it's done and gone well, we'll have a response text that's JSON that we need to parse into JavaScript. And it's only like a 15-step process. We'll get this no problem. Fortunately, it looks like this. And when we use Axios, all of this is done in about 5 words. So this looks way more complex than where we're heading. But just to show you, when we get to a framework, what we'll say instead of this and this, all we'll have to say is Axios, get my data. And Axios will do all of this for you. So next week, we'll start Monday with Axios, but we have to give you at least one exercise where you're using the ready state change and XHR objects, because my very first interview ever was a take-home project. And he said, I would like you to do server requests with an XHR object. And I'd like you to write a React program with no, what they call JSX. Well, I didn't even listen to the requirements because those didn't sound like words to me. So I used Axios and I didn't get the job. So let's know what these words are. They're important. That's where everything comes from.
Why would they do this? HR is just more or less extra knowledge stuff that company use.
Well, yes, and yes. If Axios breaks, if I make a GET request with Axios and it breaks, if I don't know what it's doing for me, I'm gonna have a hard time fixing it. It's the same reason why we cover functions before higher order functions, or for loops before higher order functions. You have to imagine what a for loop is doing. So that if it breaks, we kind of know where to look.
The ready state always be 1, 2, 3, 4.
Always. It starts at 1 as soon as we say send. It ends at 4 as soon as it's done.
And the HR status always.
If it went well. So 200 if it went well. 404 if the thing we requested doesn't exist. So 404 doesn't exist. Anything in the 500 range, server did something awful. The server done messed up. 403 through 401 through 403. No need to memorize this right now. We'll use them later. This is you are not authorized. You're not logged in. You can't make a post on my site. Log in first. Yeah. 201, post. We added something new to the database. Added something new successfully. The one we'll be dealing with the most right now is 200 because we're going to be focusing on our GET requests. And then we'll move into posts.
Where did you declare this?
Down here.
And how would you describe AJAX?
AJAX is the ability for my program to keep running while this is happening. So if this was a full application and I was interacting with my website, going around pages, this is still happening in the background, waiting for it to come back. It will immediately just pop up on the screen when it's done. My whole page doesn't have to refresh. Yeah.
So you're saying AJAX is more like a concept.
AJAX is what this is using to keep this going while my website is going, or listening for that. Yeah.
Good for the JSON.
The JSON what?
Basically, bars like yeah, you're looking about JSON is.
This isn't defined?
Like word is
JSON.parse? Yeah, this is a JavaScript function. We don't have to install anything, it's just in the language, if that's what you're saying. Yes. No, to-dos, but I see what you're saying. To-do. How do I say to-do already? Here we go. Yeah, but the problem that's like to-dos are stuck in the scope of this. Ooh, I'm hearing an echo. Echo. Okay. Our to-dos are stuck in the scope of this if statement. And I don't want to do something like this where I say let to-dos and then here just say to-dos equals. Because if I try to use to-dos down here, I'm going to try to use it before it actually has the data it needs. So that's bad. It will never work if I try to do it this way. So instead, how do I get data from this scope into another scope so I can keep using it? Well, the easiest way is to say, here's my function, pass that into my function, so my function can receive it and now start using it in my program. So the last step here, so you can see why I'm calling it into this function, is we're going to make all my 2 to-do titles show up on the DOM. Oh my. Well, let's remind ourselves what this array looks like once it comes back. I've got an array of 2 objects. They all have a dot title. And this is what I'd like to put into an H1 and put that on the DOM. So what am I going to need in my list to do's function in order to go through this array and add the titles to elements, add them on the DOM? Yeah, well, so maybe let's just do it for the first one. We'll say array bracket 0. Let's get the first to do to show up on the DOM. So we have this object right here. This has a dot title, and we want this to show up right here on our web page. So I'll save this in a variable. Const my first to do equals the first item in the array you're receiving from up here. Now it's my 3-step process. Create an element, edit the element, append to DOM. So I'm going to create H1. Great. Now I want to add the to-do's title to the H1's text content. What is the syntax for that? Yeah, text content equals what? My first to-do, which is the whole object, dot title. Yeah, that's the part of the object that we want. Now I need to show up on the DOM. I'm going to be lazy about this and say document dot, oh wait, yeah, document dot body. You can say that if you want the body. I wouldn't suggest using this. This is quick. And we're going to append into it our H1. My to-do is on the DOM, and I didn't have to write it anywhere. It came from a database far, far away. Where are we losing it here? I feel like we're just like, we're getting it, and then all of a sudden, okay, something happened. That part's magic. I mean, all this is new for sure. The important part is when it came back, we got our data, and then we called our function and passed it in as an argument. So our function could then receive it as a parameter when it was called. We said, give me the first item, which is the first object from that array, and I put its title property onto the DOM. I could do the same thing. Instead of the title, what if I wanted to put the description property of that object on the DOM? There's the description property of that object. Well, how many items did I have in this array? 2. I would like both titles to show up. Should I repeat this process again, write them all out line by line? How do I tell my computer to repeat this for as many items as there are in that array? Let's wrap all this in a for loop. Yeah. While you're not as far as the array.length that I'm giving you, keep incrementing. But now what do I need to change about this part to make it actually show up?
When you get into like set up using H1, just like document.variable.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it line by line so it's easier to read. But what's breaking here? How come we're not seeing anything show up? This doesn't exist anymore. Instead, we're looping through the array. So how do I, instead of referring to the individual object, how do I use the array to refer to the item that the loop is looping over? Yeah. Say, hey, the current object in the arrays dot title should be put in an H1, and then put on the DOM. If you want to see something crazy, we're getting a little out of control here, but we're going to go to Postman. I'm going to go do a post request and add, this is my third view, and post. Oh, then I'm going to refresh my page so it does another GET request. Oh my gosh. So satisfying. It really is. Once you start saving and getting your data back and forth, when you come back tomorrow, it'll still be there. Me to learn code? Just don't sleep for like 3 months. And no, I took the course, and I was here on the weekends, mornings, nights, anytime I could give. And since the course, I've just kept coding every day. It gets easier. Believe me, it was not like this when I started. I'd love to show you my pre-course project. I made a box that when you click a button, it changes colors. And it would work until the 4th color, and then it would crash. It was really cool. I thought it was really cool.
One thing I always had a difficulty wrapping my head around is line 16, we're calling this to-dos function, how passing to-do ARR into the function, why that to-do ARR didn't have to be equal to what's in the parentheses in line 25.
Oh, why can I call it?
I thought that they had to connect.
Yeah, why can I call this ARR and still have it represent the array? That is the purpose of a parameter. It is a placeholder. So if it is easier to follow, for sure do this. I'm going to give you the to-do array. You're going to receive the to-do array. And then I'm going to loop through the to-do array and add each item from the to-do array's title to the DOM.
So like when you're just doing all the X equals whatever.
Yeah. Great. Now, when you get to this point in this process where your data comes back, you want to console log this item before moving forward with this. Because while ours looked pretty safe, show you what I mean, when I console log to-do array, when I parse the response text, this looks very pleasant. All you have is an array with 3 items inside. Not all APIs are this fair or nice. You may get back an array within an object within an array with some strings. One of them's an array. You may have to dig down into this a couple levels, like look into the response data, and then we're like, look at the results, and there's the array I'm looking for. So you always want to pause right when your data comes back to the server and check what does it look like before continuing on. I bring this up because the exercise I'll give you, maybe we'll do it Monday. You guys got a lot going on right now. Let's see. Yeah. Debating. Back in the day, you would send a request, and as soon as it came back, the whole page would refresh to show it. Because you can't run 2 things at once. You can't have your computer keep running for it to interject and say, here's my data. That is why submit events refresh the page. You used to have to refresh the whole page to show the update. You don't have to do that anymore. You still have to kind of build some of the logic into that to make it work, where things like React and Angular update automatically as soon as new data shows up, which is wonderful. We're going to do it the long way first, but yeah, all of this will be slimmed down into a single line of code soon enough.
Way back in the day, people wrote letters and wrote courier by horses.
Yes. Before that, I believe they used pigeons with parcel and parchment. Is that what you're saying though? Like as far as how did these type of things? Yeah, it's hard to be like, here's the coolest new thing, and we have no idea what was the old thing. Why was it bad? It's enough to know that the bad way was everything had to refresh. You had to send the entire website over again. For here, all I have to send is, here's the new bit of data. I don't need to send you the data for your nav bar and your header and your footer. Just this, and we'll refresh just that on the page. You'll never have to click this button to see new data if you code it right. For the first little bit, we may have to refresh, but we'll fix it. Yeah, I'm gonna